The Saturday morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm, golden glow over the granite countertops. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend, the kind where I did absolutely nothing but drink coffee and read. I was standing in my pajamas, holding my favorite ceramic mug, waiting for the coffee machine to finish its final drip. My phone buzzed on the counter. I ignored it at first, but then it buzzed again and again, a rapid-fire succession of notifications that usually meant something was wrong. I picked it up, my thumb hovering over the screen. It was Instagram. Someone had tagged me in a comment, but before I could check that, I saw the post at the top of my feed. It was from Avalon. She was the woman Stetson, my ex-husband, had left me for 3 years ago. She was young, obsessed with her image, and desperate to be an influencer. The photo was a high-definition close-up of a manicured hand, the fingers spread wide to catch the light. On the ring finger sat a massive piece of jewelry. The caption read, "He did good. Ring # future Mrs. Bling finally." My breath hitched in my throat. I dropped my mug. It hit the floor with a loud crash, sending hot coffee splashing across my bare ankles and shards of ceramic skittering under the fridge. I didn't even flinch. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It wasn't just a ring. It was the ring. It was my grandmother's heirloom sapphire, the one that had been stolen 3 years ago. My hands started to shake, a violent tremor that made it hard to hold the phone. I leaned against the counter for support as the memories of that terrible day came flooding back. It was during the height of our divorce proceedings. The fighting had been ugly, mostly about money. Stetson wanted everything, but I had fought hard to keep the family heirlooms. Then, I came home from work one Tuesday to find the back door kicked in. The wood was splintered, the glass broken. I had rushed inside, screaming Stetson's name. I found him sitting on the living room couch, his head in his hands, looking devastated. He told me we had been burglarized. He said the thieves had taken his collection of expensive watches, a stack of emergency cash, and the contents of the wall safe. My grandmother's ring had been in that safe. I remembered collapsing to the floor, sobbing until I couldn't breathe. That ring was the only piece of my grandmother I had left. It was irreplaceable. Stetson had held me, stroking my hair, telling me it was just a material object and that we were lucky to be safe. I realized now, with a cold, sharp clarity that pierced my heart, that there were no burglars. The kicked-in door was a prop. The tears were an act. He had stolen it himself to keep from giving it to me in the settlement. I needed to be absolutely certain before I did anything. I grabbed my iPad from the living room table. The screen was bigger, and the resolution was better. I pulled up Avalon's profile and opened the photo. I zoomed in until the image began to pixelate slightly. I was looking for one specific, tiny detail that only I knew about. When I was 6 years old, I had been playing dress-up with my grandmother's jewelry box. I had tried to pin a brooch onto my shirt and accidentally scratched the inner gold band of the sapphire ring with a safety pin. It was a jagged, horizontal mark right next to the maker's stamp. I pinched the screen, enlarging the inner curve of the ring in the photo. There it was. It was faint, but it was undeniable. The jagged scratch was still there. A surge of rage washed over me, hot and blinding. Stetson was so cheap and so incredibly arrogant that he hadn't even paid to have the ring polished or refinished. He had simply taken the stolen heirloom out of his hiding spot and re-gifted it to his mistress, assuming I would never see it. He probably told her he bought it at an estate sale. He had proposed to his new fiancée with a felony crime scene. He thought he was untouchable, but he had just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy him. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down. I needed a paper trail. I couldn't just run to the police with a screenshot. I needed proof that Stetson had the ring recently. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for Gentry Jewelers. Gentry was an old family friend who had maintained that ring for decades. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and professional. "Gentry Jewelers, how can I help you?" "Gentry, it's Lyndon," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I have a strange question and I need you to be honest with me. Did Stetson bring in a sapphire Art Deco ring recently?" There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. "Well, yes, Lyndon," Gentry said, sounding uncomfortable. "He came in last week. He asked to have it resized. He told me. Well, he said you had lost a significant amount of weight and needed it smaller for your anniversary." My jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. Stetson had lied to the jeweler, using my name to make the transaction look legitimate. "Gentry, we have been divorced for 3 years," I said coldly. "He stole that ring. He gave it to his mistress." Gentry gasped audibly. "Oh, my heavens! Lyndon, I have the intake receipt and the photos we took for insurance purposes. I will email them to you immediately." 30 minutes later, I walked into the local police precinct. I was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, but I felt like I was wearing a suit of armor. I carried a folder containing the digital receipt from Gentry, the original appraisal from my grandmother's estate proving the ring was my sole property prior to the marriage, and the printed screenshot of Avalon's Instagram post. I approached the front desk and asked to speak to a detective. I was directed to a desk in the back, where a man named Detective Miller sat. He looked tired, sipping from a styrofoam cup. I sat down and laid the documents out on his desk. "This isn't a civil dispute about a divorce settlement," I started, cutting off his question before he could ask it. "This is grand larceny and insurance fraud. My ex-husband filed a police report 3 years ago claiming this item was stolen in a burglary. He collected the insurance payout. Now, he is in possession of the stolen goods and has gifted them to a third party." Detective Miller picked up the old police report I had brought. He looked at the photo of Avalon flaunting the ring. Then he looked at the receipt from Gentry dated last week. He sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing. "If he filed a false report and claimed the money, that is a felony," Miller said. "Do you know where the item is right now?" I smiled, but there was no humor in it. It was a smile of pure tactical advantage. I pulled up the next screenshot on my iPad. It was a digital invitation that Avalon had posted on her story just an hour ago. She was bragging about their engagement celebration. "Yes, detective. I know exactly where the ring is. They are hosting a surprise engagement brunch at the Grand Hotel tomorrow morning at 11:00 a.m. I pointed to the date and time. "The suspect, Stetson, will be there, and the stolen property will be on the finger of his fiancée, Avalon. It is a public event." Detective Miller nodded slowly. He typed something into his computer, his face serious. "We can recover the property," he said. "Since there is an open case number from the original theft, and we have proof of fraud, we have probable cause to seize the item immediately." He looked at me. "We can go to the hotel tomorrow. It's better to secure the evidence when we know exactly where it is, rather than risking him hiding it again if we tip him off by going to his house." I nodded. "I want to be there," I said. "I want to see him realize he didn't get away with it." Miller hesitated, then nodded. "You can be nearby, but do not interfere." I went home, but I couldn't settle down. I paced my living room. Part of me wanted to ambush him, but another part of me, the part that used to love him, wanted to give him one tiny chance to do the right thing. I knew he wouldn't take it. He was too arrogant. But I had to try, mostly so I could tell myself I did. I sat on my couch and typed a single text message to Stetson. "I saw the ring on Avalon's finger. I know it's my grandmother. Return it to my front porch by midnight, or I will involve the authorities." I hit send and watched the screen. The 3 little dots appeared almost instantly. His reply came through with a ding that sounded like a gavel falling. "You're crazy, you're seeing things. I bought this ring at an estate sale in the city. It's not yours. Stop being jealous just because I'm happy and moved on. You're pathetic. Blocked." I stared at the message. He lied so easily. He truly believed I was too weak to fight back. He thought I would just cry and accept it like I did during the divorce. He was wrong. He had just confirmed he had no intention of returning it. He had sealed his fate. I took a screenshot of his text and forwarded it to Detective Miller as final proof of his refusal to cooperate. Sunday morning arrived with a crisp, cool breeze that felt like justice. I woke up feeling surprisingly calm. I didn't drink coffee this time. I drank a tall glass of ice water. I went to my closet and picked out my best dress, a sharp navy blue sheath dress that made me feel powerful and professional. I wasn't going to the party to make a screaming scene or throw a drink in anyone's face. I was going to be a silent witness to his destruction. I applied my makeup carefully, hiding the dark circles from a sleepless night. I drove to the Grand Hotel and parked my car a block away to avoid being seen. I walked to the coffee shop directly across the street from the hotel's main ballroom entrance. The ballroom had floor-to-ceiling glass windows that looked out onto the street. From my table by the window, I had a perfect view of the gathering inside. I saw the gold and white balloons. I saw the waiters moving around with trays of champagne. I saw Stetson, laughing and shaking hands in a tailored suit. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Detective Miller. "The party has started. The target is inside." Then I sat back, crossed my legs, and waited for the show to begin. From my vantage point across the street, I could see everything clearly. The ballroom was filling up with the city's elite. Stetson had always been obsessed with status, so he had invited his boss, his business partners, and all of our old mutual friends who had sided with him during the split. Avalon was wearing a tight white cocktail dress, looking every bit the blushing bride. She was beaming, practically glowing with triumph. I watched as she circulated the room, grabbing arms and hugging people. She held her left hand up constantly, waving it around, flashing the ring to anyone who would look. I could see women grabbing her hand, oohing and awing, leaning in to admire the sapphire. Stetson was standing near the head table, holding a glass of champagne high. He tapped a spoon against the glass, calling for silence. The room quieted down. He began to give a speech. I couldn't hear the words through the glass, but I knew his body language. He was puffing his chest out, talking about his success, about investing in the future. He looked so proud of himself. He had no idea that his future was about to walk through the double doors behind him. Just as Stetson raised his glass for a toast, the double doors to the ballroom swung open with force. The music cut out immediately. 2 uniformed police officers and Detective Miller walked into the room. The effect was instantaneous. The guests froze in mid-sip. Heads turned. The waiters stopped in their tracks. I watched through the window as the air seemed to be sucked out of the room. Detective Miller marched straight toward the head table, his expression grim. Stetson looked annoyed at first, likely thinking it was a noise complaint or a mistake by the hotel staff. He lowered his glass and said something, probably dismissing them. I saw him gesture as if to say, "Not now, I'm busy." But Detective Miller didn't stop. He stepped right up to Stetson and spoke loudly enough that I could see people in the back of the room recoil. He wasn't whispering. He was making a declaration. "Stetson last name?" Miller asked. Stetson nodded, confused. Miller held up a piece of paper, the search and seizure warrant. "We are investigating a felony theft," Miller said, his words likely cutting through the silence like a knife. "We have a warrant to seize the ring currently worn by Ms. Avalon." I saw Avalon's face drop. She looked from the detective to Stetson, her mouth opening in shock. The guests gasped. I could see the ripple of whispered panic moving through the crowd like a wave. "What? No, this is my engagement ring." Avalon appeared to be shouting, clutching her hand to her chest defensively. She looked terrified, her eyes darting around the room. Uniformed officer stepped toward her. He was professional but firm. "Ma'am," he said, and I imagined his voice was stern and commanding. "That item is reported stolen property linked to an open insurance fraud case. You are in possession of stolen goods. You need to hand it over as evidence immediately, or we will have to place you under arrest for possession of stolen property." Avalon looked at Stetson for help, waiting for him to fix it. But Stetson was paralyzed. He was white as a sheet. He knew the jig was up. He knew exactly what ring that was. The fantasy life he had built for her was crumbling in real time, right in front of everyone they had tried so hard to impress. Avalon began to cry, messy tears ruining her makeup. She tried to pull the ring off her finger, but it wouldn't budge. Between the heat of the room, the alcohol, the salt from the food, and the sudden stress, her fingers had swollen. She tugged and pulled, her face turning red with exertion and embarrassment. The officer waited patiently, holding out a clear plastic evidence bag. The entire room was watching her struggle. It was the ultimate humiliation. Finally, in a desperate move, she grabbed a silver butter knife from the table. She scooped up a glob of butter and smeared it all over her finger. I watched through the window as she greased her hand, ruining her manicure and making a disgusting mess of the white tablecloth. With a painful yank that must have hurt, she slid the ring over her knuckle. It came off, slick with grease. She dropped it into the plastic evidence bag the officer was holding. She looked defeated, holding her greasy hand away from her white dress, sobbing openly now. The symbol of her victory over me was now just a piece of evidence in a police bag. Stetson finally snapped out of his shock and tried to intervene. He stepped between Avalon and the detective, waving his hands aggressively. "This is insane," he seemed to be yelling, his face turning red. "This is my ex-wife. She's lying. She's just jealous. You have no right to ruin my party." He was trying to gaslight the police, just like he used to gaslight me for years. Detective Miller wasn't having it. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, the receipt from Gentry. He held it up for Stetson to see. "We have a sworn witness statement from Gentry Jewelers that you brought this specific ring in for resizing last week," Miller said, cutting him off. "And we have your police report from 3 years ago claiming this exact ring was stolen by a stranger. You filed a false police report and committed insurance fraud." Stetson stopped shouting. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. The officer behind him didn't wait. He spun Stetson around. I saw the glint of metal. They cuffed his hands behind his back right there in front of his boss, his mother, and his fiancée. Suddenly, a woman in a floral dress came rushing out of the crowd. It was Solange, Stetson's mother. Solange had always been his biggest enabler. She had made my life a living hell during our marriage, always taking his side no matter how wrong he was. She ran up to the detectives, screaming and pointing a finger in their faces. "You can't take him," she shrieked. "That ring belongs to the family. It belongs to us." Detective Miller turned his attention to her. "Ma'am," he asked calmly, "did you know he had this ring in his possession?" Solange, in her panic and arrogance, slipped up completely. She thought she could bully the police. "Of course I knew," she yelled. "I told him to keep it safe in my attic until the divorce was over so that greedy girl wouldn't get it. He was just taking back what was his." The room went deadly silent. Solange had just admitted, in front of police and 50 witnesses, to conspiring to hide assets and aiding in the fraud. She had just confessed to being an accessory to the crime. What neither Stetson nor Solange realized was that the world was watching. One of Avalon's friends, a young woman in a pink dress, had been live-streaming the toast on TikTok when the police walked in. She hadn't stopped recording. She had captured the entry, the seizure of the ring, the arrest, and Solange's damning confession. Although the video cut off as Stetson was being dragged out the double doors, the damage was done. By the time I looked down at my phone in the coffee shop, the 3-minute clip was already circulating on local community pages. The title was catchy and brutal. "Engagement Party Raided by Police for Stolen Ring." The views were climbing by the second. The comments were savage. People were tagging Stetson's company. They were mocking Avalon. The veneer of perfection they had tried so hard to curate was destroyed not by rumors, but by high-definition video evidence of their own crimes. The internet does not forgive, and it certainly does not forget. I watched the police cars drive away with Stetson in the back seat. I finished my water and paid my tab, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't expected. As I was walking back to my car, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it. A robotic voice said, "You have a collect call from an inmate at the city jail. Press 1 to accept." I pressed 1. "Lyndon," Stetson's voice exploded in my ear. He sounded hysterical, breathless. "You crazy witch, drop the charges. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. You ruined my life. You ruined my engagement." I walked slowly to my car, unlocking the door with a beep. I spoke softly, my voice calm and steady. "I didn't do anything, Stetson. You proposed to another woman with my dead grandmother's soul. You committed fraud. You lied to the police. You ruined your own life." He started to scream expletives at me, desperate and angry, but I didn't listen. "Enjoy the cell," I said, and I hung up the phone. I blocked the number immediately. The fallout continued to spiral quickly. Because Solange had publicly admitted to hiding the ring in her attic to hide assets from the divorce court, the police now had probable cause to believe other, stolen items were in her home. Detective Miller obtained a search warrant for Solange's house within hours. He called me later that afternoon. "Mrs. Lyndon, we are executing a search warrant at the mother's residence to look for other items listed on that original burglary report. We need you to come down to identify anything that might be yours." I agreed immediately. I drove to Solange's house, a place I hadn't visited in 3 years. There were police cars in the driveway. Solange was sitting on her front porch crying into a tissue, watching as officers carried boxes out of her pristine suburban home. She looked up and saw me. The look of pure hatred she gave me could have peeled paint, but I just walked past her like she wasn't even there. I followed Detective Miller into the guest bedroom. It smelled like lavender and betrayal. "We found a lockbox in the back of the closet," he said. He opened it on the bed. My breath caught in my throat. Inside, nestled in velvet pouches, wasn't just the ring, which they already had in evidence, but other things. There was my vintage Cartier watch, a gift from my father for my graduation. There were savings bonds in my name that had vanished during the move. There was even a pearl necklace that Stetson had claimed he sold to pay off debts. They hadn't been stolen by strangers. They hadn't been sold. Stetson and Solange had split the loot like pirates. They had hidden my own property from me, gaslighting me for years, making me believe I was crazy or careless. Seeing it all there, safe and sound, made me realize the depth of their malice. They didn't just want the money, they wanted to hurt me. They wanted to strip me of everything. While the police were raiding Solange's house, Avalon was at the police station being interviewed. She wasn't charged, as she cooperated fully and claimed ignorance, but the reality of her situation hit her hard. During the questioning, she learned the truth about Stetson's finances. He hadn't bought the ring because he was frugal. He stole it because he was broke. He was drowning in debt. He had leveraged everything to keep up appearances for her. The lavish lifestyle she fell for was a mirage funded by credit cards and fraud. Realizing she had been played, Avalon went into damage control mode. She posted a statement on her Instagram story that evening black text on a white background. "I was a victim of a con man. I had no idea about the history of the ring or his crimes. I am single and focusing on myself." She threw him under the bus instantly to save her own reputation. Stetson lost his fiancée before he even made bail. She deleted every photo of him from her profile within the hour. The criminal charges were just the beginning of Stetson's nightmare. The insurance company that had paid out the claim 3 years ago was notified of the arrest. They were not happy. Insurance fraud is a serious crime, and they are ruthless about recovering their money. They filed their own charges against Stetson. They demanded immediate repayment of the $40,000 payout he had received for the burglary, plus interest, plus massive penalties for the fraud. Because Stetson didn't have the cash, he had spent it on trips with Avalon and leasing a car he couldn't afford. The court froze all his bank accounts. He couldn't access a dime. He couldn't pay his lawyer. He couldn't pay his rent. His financial life was frozen instantly. The debt he had tried to hide was now the anchor dragging him to the bottom of the ocean. He was completely insolvent. Monday morning came, and the final domino fell. Stetson worked for a high-end finance firm in the city. They dealt with other people's money, which meant trust was their currency. They had a strict morality clause in their contracts. The news of his arrest for grand larceny, insurance fraud, and filing a false police report had reached his bosses, mostly because one of them was at the engagement party and saw him get cuffed. Stetson received an email while he was sitting in the bail bondsman's office, trying to find someone to sign for him. He was fired, effective immediately, for cause. He lost his 6-figure salary, his bonuses, and his reputation in the industry. No finance firm would ever hire a man convicted of fraud. In the span of 48 hours, he had lost his fiancée, his mother's freedom, his money, and his career. He had nothing left. Solange did not escape unscathed. The district attorney, seeing the video of her confession and the stockpile of stolen goods in her home, decided to make an example of her. She was charged with receiving stolen property and conspiracy to commit fraud. Solange was a woman who prided herself on her social standing. She was on the board of the garden club. She volunteered at the library. When her mugshot was released, her hair messy, her makeup smeared from crying, it destroyed her. She was humiliated. In her anger, she turned on Stetson. She told her lawyer that Stetson had forced her to hide the box, that she was a victim of her son's manipulation. She blamed him for bringing that girl Avalon into their lives and causing this mess. The mother and son, who had been thick as thieves, were now tearing each other apart in legal briefs, fighting to stay out of prison. A week later, the police released the evidence back to me. I went to the station to pick up the ring. The officer handed me the plastic bag. I opened it and slid the ring into my palm. It felt heavy. It was covered in black fingerprint dust and a greasy film of dried butter from Avalon's struggle to remove it. I didn't try to clean it myself. I drove straight to Gentry's shop. When I walked in, Gentry came around the counter. He looked devastated. "Lyndon," he said, his eyes welling up. "I am so sorry. I should have called you the moment he walked in. I didn't want to cause trouble." I handed him the dirty ring. "It's okay, Gentry. You helped me get it back. That's what matters." He took the ring to the back and spent an hour cleaning it. When he brought it out, it sparkled like new. The butter was gone. The bad energy was washed away. It was just my grandmother's ring again, pure and beautiful. While I was there, I asked Gentry to reappraise the ring. I wanted to know exactly what Stetson had been sitting on. Gentry put on his loupe and examined the stones. He checked the market rates for vintage sapphires. He looked up at me, surprised. "Lyndon," he said, "the value of Art Deco jewelry has skyrocketed in the last 3 years. Because of the size of this sapphire and the provenance, this ring is worth 3 times what it was when you were married." He wrote a number on a piece of paper and slid it across the glass counter. It was more than Stetson's annual salary used to be. I smiled. Stetson had been sitting on a fortune, but he was too greedy to sell it and too cheap to buy a new one. I took the ring and the new appraisal straight to the bank. I rented a safety deposit box. I placed the ring inside, locking it away in the dark, safe from thieves, liars, and ex-husbands. 6 months later, I attended a charity gala in the city. I was wearing the vintage Cartier watch I had recovered from Solange's house. I was standing near the bar when I saw Avalon. She looked different, less flashy, more subdued. She saw me and hesitated, then walked over. "Lyndon," she said, her voice quiet. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know about the ring. I didn't know he stole it." She looked genuine, or at least humbled by the scandal. I looked at her, and then I looked down at the ring on her right hand. It was a simple, small cubic zirconia band. I looked her in the eye. "I know you didn't know, Avalon," I said calmly. "But you ignored the red flags. A fake man can't handle a real diamond." I turned and walked away, the lights of the chandelier catching the gold of my watch. I was whole again. I had my history back. And Stetson? He was still waiting for trial, learning the hard way that some heirlooms are priceless, but some ex-husbands are absolutely worthless.